An applause at the beginning. That's good. Hopefully I live up to it at the end. So I was watching Sally's, and this slide was, it kind of, it takes most of my presentation. So when she circled, depends on the patient and the local custom, man, is that a lot of medicine to me. So that's kind of one of my whole points of my lecture. But I'm really excited to present this one. I first thought of this probably about 4 or 5 years ago and tried to present it at AAM, but they turned me down. So it's here like 3 or 4 years later, and I've made some changes to it. I don't have any conflicts of interest. Well, I have a lot of conflicts of interest, but none that I'm good enough to get paid for. So I don't really have to declare anything. This one stemmed from kind of 2 sayings that people say when they're thinking about, oh, that must be really difficult to do. And one of them is like, this isn't brain surgery. And we all know how difficult that is because what's every consult we get from neurosurgery say? No intervention indicated at this time. Or, you know, this is rocket science. And these are kind of the 2 things that I think of when people say, gosh, that's really, really complicated. And I'm like, man, what we do is pretty complicated. We're kind of set up in this small room with not many resources, with patients we don't know that have no histories. People interrupt us every 6 minutes. And we have to find a diagnosis and be correct 99% of the time. Like, that's a pretty tough job. But it's not rocket science. So I kind of tried to figure out what's the closest thing that I could compare to rocket science and like how good we are. So I took planes. And I'm like, okay, so rocket science planes, like they're not sending shuttles into space that often anymore. So I kind of looked and I'm like, okay, well, these always, I see these in the papers all the time, and these stats kind of rub me a little bit. And so I looked up, these are like 2015 and 2016 statistic mesh, because as you'll see, my value in statistics waxes and wanes, as we'll get into. But this one, there's about 3 million flights, US commercial flights worldwide, 2015. I'm assuming there's about the same in 2016, I don't know. In 2016, there were 0 deaths on those flights. All right. And then we get this one all the time because this is how bad we are at medicine. We kill people every year. We kill a lot of people every year. And they're directly due to medical errors. So this was the To Err is Human. It's a pretty famous study that was put out in '99. And they're saying we kill like 44,000 to 88,000 people every year. Whose birthday is it this week? Anybody's birthday?
My daughter.
Oh, Juliana, you're up. This is my birthday gift to you. How does that make you feel? What do you think? What are your emotions? Are you going to go be a pilot? It's okay? Okay. As expected. It's terrible. The equal comparisons? No. Why not, Melissa?
Dr. Clinic said that.
And he's always.
He said pilots died with a plane.
So, it's true, we've got no practice insurance, so it's not much of a big man. Is it the same job? Is their job as easy as ours? What's the difference?
Human beings.
Human beings?
Yep. Yeah, they're piloting machines.
They're pilot machines.
Variable.
Gosh, I wish I had my chalkboard. Oh, yeah. Because you're not supposed to do this in a lecture. Dr. Jarrett. Variables. So we think human beings are more variable than airplanes and rocket science. Rocket science is pretty easy. What's the difference variables? Ronald?
They're also not treating, they're like not flying a plane that's imminently trying to crash itself.
All right. They don't have the sick planes. All right, I buy that. Like, no sickness plane guy.
Yeah, they won't fly a plane unless it's like 100%. They're 100% satisfied with the conditions. Like if they show up to the shift and it's not to their liking, they just won't do it.
Right.
We can't go in and be like, oh, I don't like the look of the patient today.
Some of us can, emergency medicine physicians. We've got EMTALA, and everyone's like, this one's a little difficult. I can't just go to the ER. Then we have one. Right. So they check the plane. They check it for certain things, like the stability of the plane. What are the other variables that we deal with that they don't deal with? Changes. Personalities. And it gets pretty complex, right? So my title of mine was kind of scientific method. So I'm kind of looking at this as a science point of view. And is one science more difficult than another? A plane, they got mass, velocity, some momentum, some friction. I don't know, those don't change too often. Doesn't sound that difficult to me. I could probably land a plane. They have autopilot. They didn't even have to do it. We have autopilot too. Some of those people are in the room. It's like the rest. It's
Better insurance than most of our patients.
better insurance than most of our patients. What are some of our variables?
Sleep.
Different personality or personal variables. Sleep. They control that. We control that now. Be lucky. Some of the people in the front of the room didn't control their sleep when they were going through residency.
It's just like all of a person's life, I feel, is their variable. Like, the cumulative human experience of that body could have led to something weird.
Man, and I knew you were going to participate in this. Because like this whole lecture is like it's on the thinking side. Like we're all on the continuum of thinkers and doers. And like Schnitzer was general surgery, so he's more on the doer side. And like, like Berkowitz is a big thinker. Yeah, in front of everybody. You know? So he's more on the thinker side. And Brian Jarrett's he's kind of in the middle. He wants to do things. We're thinking today, right? We're not intubating. So. Yeah, it's the whole life experience, and it gets really complex. You know, I don't even know how complex. We don't even have some of the answers. We're going to kind of get to that in the end. But we talked about a sick patient. These patients come to us already sick. All right, so they're predisposed to fatness, right? And things are changing. Disease is dynamic. Is it the genes? I mean, I don't even know what sets off certain genes. Vitamin A is a genetic modifier. I eat pizza all the time. I don't know what that tells me. This is the phenotype. There's certain things we don't even have answers to. They're dealing with like mass and acceleration. So if we take away planes from the mix and contextualize this, now we're not going to kind of deal with just what's more difficult, rocket science or emergency medicine, because I'm convinced it's emergency medicine. And we just came up with some reasons why. So if we take that number, the 44,000 to 98,000 medical error numbers, and we take the average, we go right in the middle at 71,000, we take the census at the time. The number needed to harm in 1999, anybody think we do a better job now? Yeah, if we're teaching all these awesome positions, we're not trying to do better. Okay, we hope so. We're trying to do better. But the number needed to harm was 4,000. The number needed to treat to save a life. So we got a little two different endpoints. The number needed to harm was to die, but the number needed to treat is to extend or save lives. Okay, but it's still 16,000. Yeah. How come you guys aren't walking out of here right now? Just throw your arms up. I get all these years of medical science, and this is how good we were doing in 2000. Well, this is a bit unfair too, right? Can we do anything better? I mean, I show up to shifts frequently, and I don't save lives that often. It's really, really hard to save a life. We can extend lives. You get really good at that in your second year of residency to extend that life until your shift ends. And then you can sign it out and see what happens the next day. So we can extend lives. It's really, really hard to save lives, but do we do anything else?
We comfort.
We comfort people.
Educate.
We educate people. So pain medicine's pretty good. They break their arm. We put some stitches in. We fix people. So it's not like medicine doesn't do any good just because we're not saving a whole bunch of lives. There's other ways in our healthcare system to save lives. And we know that because it's really, really difficult to save a life. So we kind of talked about all our variables, and we contextualize between rocket science and neurosurgery, I guess, and human and the external and internal, and we got all the variables in there. But there's more than just variables in the people that we deal with. We like black and white answers, and as all you know, I don't think there's many out there. I think medicine is gray. And what Dr. Bogosh just said is you want to sit in a lecture and you want to come away and say, this is when I intubate, this is not when I intubate, this is what the beta HCG does for me, this is what this study told me, therefore I'm going to do this. We just want to know what we do. And you start your residency kind of that way, and you finish it kind of thinking, gosh, they don't even give the same guidelines they did 4 years ago. You know, what's changed in that? So let's look at the research, and we'll try to contextualize this. This is kind of one of my favorite things, or something I thought of, because in 2004 to 2008, when I was in residency, and I think the publication was here. Might have been Zatopshi's, I don't know whose it was. One of them was using alpha blockers for renal stones. And at that time, it was like, yes, we should use it. This is a good thing. We're going to pass stones faster. And then in like 2012 or 2013, they said, well, wait a second, we're not so sure about that. And so I was like, wait, I've been practicing this for like 5 or 6 years. Like, this is what I do. I give everybody alpha blockers. And then it said, maybe not. Like, what's the answer? Like, I'm getting ripped off by the literature. And this is 2016 in BMJ, and I like the BMJ because they don't have many conflicts of interest. In the results, the second line, third line, the baseline rate of stone passage without an alpha blocker ranged from 7% in Thailand to 82% in Australia. So that might affect our results in some way. So not all research is equal, and I leave the highly statistical manipulations to that corner of the room, and I come to them and ask them for it. But we know this. You're going to start practicing based off of one piece of literature, but it's not that good. So not only do we want to put our profession in context, we want to put the literature in context. And this is modern medicine in my feeling right here. And what we actually do better in medicine now than we've ever done before. Does anybody besides Dr. Sinners and Topsy know who the guy at the top is? This is like worth 1,000 points.
Bates.
Thomas Bates. Oh, Kyle, he's the first. It's 1,000 points. So he did a thing, and I thought it was really cool. During residency, in my CPC presentation, I was like, this is cool. Like, we can actually find an answer to the CPC question. I can take all the symptoms I've been given. I can figure out what tests I need to do. I can figure out their likelihood ratios, and I can come up with a post-test probability. And my answer actually was split out by percentages. I was like, it's a 70% chance they have this. It's a 50% chance they have this. It's a 30%. And I was like, this is cool. This is like what everybody says computers is going to do for us. We don't need humans anymore in the emergency department because we can just calculate that. But I think, he goes beyond that. I mean, it's a little bit of your chest pain patient. What is our patient? Put that patient in context. What's the pretest probability? Is this a zero risk patient? Is this a 22-year-old that had palpitations and can go home? Or is this the diabetic, hypertensive, 65-year-old with a heart attack in the past? So, not only did he put the patient in context, but he, I think, put the literature in context a little bit, because he's saying the inquiry and the answers are less important than the context. And I think that, for just the slide I put up before, like they came out with, they said, the question was, does alpha blockers pass your stone faster? And they said, yeah, it does, for the most part. They looked at the last 15 years of literature. But the context matters of all that literature too. And then it matters in your patient. Is this a 7mm stone? Is this a 3mm stone? Was this in Thailand or was this in Australia? Right? So the literature matters. There's not that black and white answer. So there's a couple of good things that I liked and that I've already used to calculate. And I kind of learned from Dr. Sinnert. If you give a presentation, maybe make up some of your own calculations. So I think this makes life a lot easier than for me, for relative risks, when to use a relative risk, when to use an odds ratio, and I'm not a statistician, so I don't know, I just read the papers. But if we can get this, or you can calculate these on many of the patients, who's got the fragility index? Not that new, but some people are using it quite often. Can anybody define it? That's like 30,000 points. It's just, a doer.
It'd be like, say, change one person's outcome or a couple people's outcomes, like how truthful are the results going to be?
Yeah, so Dr. Sinnert gives an excellent lecture on statistical significance and what is the actual meaning of that p-value. And it gets a little too complex for me. But I think it plays into the fragility index, because if you change one person in the intervention to the non-intervention that had a different outcome, and that changes your statistical significance, that's your fragility index. So if it's 1, it's pretty fragile. It's not that robust. If it's 100, well, we have to kind of look at that study. So it's a way to kind of group a whole bunch of studies. If you have some studies that you think is right, but all of them have a fragility index of 1, how good are those studies? And then you look, well, how significant is the disease? So just because we said science is the truth and science is the answer, like in rocket science, we can send something to the moon, it's not the case in medicine. That's another one of our variables. Our literature varies, and our statistical significance, I don't know how meaningful it is all that time. But these kind of helped me. So I did a couple. Oh, this was great. So in one of the papers that presented the fragility index, and I'm kind of on board with this, and this is something I thought would be interesting for the residency. They looked at 399 RCTs. Like, RCTs are good. Like, that's kind of the study that we want to look at, right? And in all of those 399, the median fragility index was 8. That's how good that research was. If you just switched 8 people from one side to having the other outcome by chance or not by chance, changes your result. You have a completely different result in your study. And that was the median. 25% of them had a fragility index of less than 3, and 10% had a 0, because they use a Fisher's exact test, and it's a little bit more of a conservative test than some of the RCTs use. So you can take 2 errors, you can have a lot of false negatives, in which they said you can have a fragility index of 0. So that was kind of it. But I thought that was kind of fascinating. When we look at all this literature, and we say this is the right answer, we put this up and says who does this based on this study? How good are the studies? And we have to put all the studies in context. Passing a renal stone in the last 15 years has changed on many different studies. I like ours. I like the one that we did. So this is a shout out. This kind of makes me laugh. Because Dr. Danley and Dr. Moran gifted me a study, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. I don't know if they know I've read it because my name's on it, but I haven't. And so it came, fibromyalgia, which is like an illness I don't even know if it exists, right? Like, I'm not even sure this is a real disease. I guess it is. We have a definition for it. I don't really know what it is. And Lyrica is a commercial to me. I've never prescribed Lyrica in my life. I just see it on commercials. But now I'm on this paper. So thanks. This is awesome. But it had a really interesting outcome. They decreased the pain in fibromyalgia to 50% with Lyrica compared to placebo. Their number needed to treat was 10. Which is a pretty good number needed to treat. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. Maybe fibromyalgia is a real disease. So I figured, well, that can't be right. So I calculated the fragility index because we didn't place it in there. And I was like, wow, 145. Like, that is pretty good. They state the errors of the study too. But I was like, okay, maybe I'll keep my name on this paper. 145, I like it. But if we think about in medicine of all the things we do, and we start to use the fragility index and the number needed to treat, number needed to harm, we're probably all on the same page. And I kind of use the example of one of the most controversial things between neurology and emergency medicine, and that's pushing TPA. And there's probably one study that it came out to that set it on a path for the neurologist to push TPA in everybody. And so if we put the literature in context, and I think we're mostly on board by putting the patient in context, we've kind of pushed that on them, like, ooh, this is an 85-year-old, it's been like 8 or 9 hours. I know you said you can go out to 6, and ECAS 1 and 2 you don't pay attention to, and all of that stuff. Then we can get them to buy in. We're like, maybe we shouldn't put TPA, or call your attending and have them push the TPA, because I don't think it's such a good idea. We can get them to buy in. But if we put the literature in context, maybe we can start, because there's some negative studies with TPA. We ignore them for the most part. But there's one study, the NINS trial, I think, that kind of sent the momentum off in a direction. Let's guess. What do I hear for the fragility index in the NINS study? And it's really hard to do it because, you had a quick hand on that one. So it's hard to do because they use Ranson criteria, and fragility index is usually binary. It's usually one thing or not the other. So you kind of have to group into their outcomes whether they did better or worse, not necessarily the Ranson criteria. But we can generally figure it out in the NINS study of fragility indexes. I hear Eames. What are you starting with? 3? 145 I got. Dr. Donnelly, Dr. Moringa, 145. Any other takers? Plus or minus 145. Plus or minus 2. Oh, we're going lower than 2. Well, there's a reason why we think Eden's really smart. He's read it. It's 3. It could be 4. It's between 3 and 4. Again, it's hard to figure out from that. But if just 3 people had different outcomes in that study for whatever reason, we might not have neurology breathing down our throats to push TPA in every single patient. So I think those help me. Those help me put the literature in context. So we're starting to put our profession in context, putting the literature in our context, Thomas Space putting the patient in our context. And then we're going to go one step further towards a whole new gray area. And this is kind of fascinating because we do things and then realize that it's not the right thing later. And we think that the observation, the physical sciences, is limited to things that we grasp, things that we see. We say this is all cause and effect, right? We put an intervention, there's an effect. But science doesn't really work like that. And like 100 years ago, I don't know when Heisenberg did it, but he actually defined it. And how he defined it was something also complex for me, is he was the guy that said, oh, you know, all these electrons and protons and neutrons and atom and quantum physics that we all kind of had to get through as a prerequisite, or we really like, but I don't know if there's any physics majors here? No, we all had to get through. All right, so, you know, all these particles are rotating around in the nucleus, but we can never locate them. We can never find them. They're like approximately here, they're orbiting, and we're like, I don't really get that. What do you mean you can't find it? Like, just find it. The electron jumps, it goes up and down. We get it. And then he said, so he tried to do it. He goes, well, I can figure out the momentum, so I've got the cause. I can figure out the momentum of this particle. And the closer that I can get to the momentum, I can project where this particle is going to be. And he's going to find the answer. But what he found was the closer that he could find the accurate momentum, the further he got from locating the particle. So we don't know. There's a whole bunch of things we don't know. And it happens to us in our everyday practice. In my residency, we started pushing 5-metoprolol on every chest pain patient because it made sense. Beta blockers, chest pain, okay, we'll slow their heart down, and I'll have and then people started dying, and we're like, oh, well, that didn't work. So our cause and effect doesn't always work. And we know that from other things. Blood pressure guidelines are like my favorite, right? Because every 4 years we get new blood pressure guidelines. So we're going to get another, when's the next blood pressure guidelines come out? Anybody know? Yeah, so a couple of years. They just came out. They just came out like 2 years ago. So we're wrong right now because they're going to have new ones in 2 years. Whatever we're doing right now is going to be wrong in Absolutely. And what we were doing 2 years ago was wrong, because 4 years ago we were doing something different. And all those guidelines changed. A lot of the residents in here came through medical school during the prostate screening thing when we said, that's not good. I have put up the argument of breast cancer screening too, because Switzerland believes it, and I think we have the evidence that we shouldn't be doing it. But asthma, do we have time for asthma? Asthma I love, because asthma is something we know, right? We see asthma every day. We know asthma. How do you treat asthma? What do you give them? Give a beta agonist, we give steroids, do anything else? Anticholinergic. All right, so we treat, how do we diagnose asthma? PFTs, or in the emergency room, they're wheezing. So, kid comes in wheezing, they're an asthmatic for the rest of their life. They're in the asthma. They're in the asthma room. They've got asthma. And it's true, and some of those patients, right, they probably stick with diagnosis with asthma. I mean, how many of those kids get PFTs on them? But I don't get it. You're telling me, and I have asthma, so this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. So, is it bronchoconstriction? Because I get a beta agonist and I feel better. But you're telling me it's inflammation disease. Because we give steroids. Steroids don't make me feel better, right? Maybe an anticholinergic. Is it really all those things? Or maybe our treatment's ahead of our diagnostic abilities. Our PFT is kind of an indirect measure anyway, right? We're not testing their lungs. And we know, because you've treated these patients, some things work better for other patients, right? So some people probably are bronchoconstrictor dependent. And we ask them, like, well, what makes your asthma worse? Is it going out in the cold? Or is it a sickness? And some of them are like, no, it doesn't bother me at all. And some of them are like, yeah, every time I go out in the winter, I get my asthma, and it's that time of year, and it's probably bronchoconstriction. But it's probably a couple of different lung illnesses that have similar outcomes of wheezing, and we lump it in, and we just treat it with everything because we can't really diagnose it well enough. That's what I'm guessing, but it's one of those answers that comes back to me in medicine is, I don't really know. But it doesn't make us bad doctors because we can make these patients better. So my takeaway points are mostly Thomas Bayes, because he taught us how to put our patients in context. He taught us how to put our literature in context. We can put our whole science in context of what we know and we don't know and what's going to change. And I think if you go into practice the rest of your life and critically appraise the literature, not just one study, but look at all of them over the last 30 years and where they sit, and then use that on a patient that it's indicated in, because it's not across all patients in all countries, in all ages. It's not black and white. Then you get to a pretty good outcome, and we can make people better. That's it for me. Any questions? Yeah, and how many questions on theory kind of literature? So I got to give one of my stories. And I was thinking about it, and how I reflect on my residency, it really isn't one story. My last patient I remember, because it was a bilateral leg amputation. It was in CCT, and it came in with about 10 minutes left in my shift, on my last shift, and it was pretty cool. You got to start it, and then I signed it up. And that was it. So I'll always remember that patient. But there's one other thing that I remember from my residency that kind of sticks with me, because it defines this particular residency. I was in C1, which was before CCT exists, in another building. And I was in my first year, and I was doing my first thoracotomy. And it was really cool. And, I was at the end of the shift, and we were signing out. I said, we did a thoracotomy. And, and somebody said, oh, yeah, and what about that crash C-section? I was like, what? That happened on our shift? I had no idea. It was happening like next door during the time we were doing the thoracotomy. And it was like the end of the shift. No idea. It was one of those busy, critical shifts. So that identified this. But that's not the things. The things that surprise me is what you remember like 4 years later. Like you've seen so much stuff that so much is in your subconscious that it comes up like, oh yeah, you know, there's this one patient that came up, hit me 5 years later and I have no idea why. He was in the old emergency room, which is now the short stay unit or the OBS unit. You know when those doors open right there and you walk in? Well, there used to be a gurney right there. And for my whole shift one evening, there was a big person, like 270, 300 pounds, and we couldn't get him to lie on the stretcher, hands and knees the whole way. His bottom like facing the door. So when you walked in, he was just sitting there, and we couldn't get him down, and we couldn't keep his clothes on. So there was this big, huge, naked person as soon as you open the door for like the whole shift when you walk in, and I completely forgot about it. I probably purposely forgot about it for like 5 or 6 years. There's another one that I was in Washington, D.C., and I got into an elevator, and somebody said, oh yeah, you know what, I was treating this patient because they came off a plane and came to the emergency room. They came from like Haiti or somewhere, and they were draining pus out of a chest tube. And I got that patient, I was like, that's my story. That was my patient. That person just stole my patient. And like I called him on it. I'm like, you didn't see that patient. That was my story that I've been telling. I completely forgot about because I always thought, like, what's the person next to him on the plane thinking? Right? They're on the plane, there's this tube and all this pus and just kicking under the seat. Like, yeah. So there's all those things, and the kind of the moral of that story, or my point is, you go into every shift, and there's things that you do that you're going to forget about, and you survived every one of those days, and you gave pretty good care every one of those days. And so when you graduate and you go out, there's nothing you can't do. You're going to get through the day, and you're going to provide pretty good care, and maybe someday you'll remember it. So that's what I have. Thanks.
All right, everyone, take 10.